One of the big developments in the road cycling market for the last few years have been the trend and popularity of wide tyres. And here to talk with me about this latest tech trend is Ian from Whyte Bikes. Thanks for joining me, Ian.
Pleasure.
We've tested a few of your bikes, like the Wessex and the Glencoe, which are behind us, which are both designed around wide tyres. Where has this popularity for wide tyres come from?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is there's nothing new about the pneumatic tyre. Obviously, the first patents were 1844, I think, and then Boyd Dunlop, I think, in 1890, something like that. So we're going back a long way. But the point really is that it's such a huge performance parameter on the bike, and they knew that all the way back then. If you consider the bike as a system, the tyre rim tyre system is hugely influential in how the bike rides. So the development of the bike's obviously continued. We've got to a point now where there's some new technologies come in. Obviously the mountain bike side of the bicycle development has had a big influence. That sort of pioneering of tubeless systems as well now have had a big impact on this really influential sort of parameter of bike design. So I think that's the background really, what we're looking at, and it is just the most important part of how to get a bike more compliant.
As a bike designer, have you had to make any major concessions or changes to the bike to package the wide tyres?
Yeah,
frame?
Obviously there's the sort of pinch point, if you like, in terms of how to package a big tyre in and around the sort of chainstay area of the bike. But again, there's some developments in the last sort of 3 or 4 years have helped us there with the single ring drivetrains, for example. That's really helped free up some space in that really critical area, because you've basically got the tyre cross section. Then you've got to have some standard clearances which are laid down in the ISO regulations. Then you've got to fit your chainstay. If you've got internal cable routing, you've got to have a chainstay wide enough to get your internal cable routing. So that's not, you're not necessarily simple just to fit a chainstay in there. And then you've got your chainring. So that whole area down there, it tends to lead to a lot of packaging issues, and it's always the packaging that's the most important thing in terms of any design, really, whatever it is, of bicycle or anything else. So getting a good packaging solution is good, and so the single chain rings have been really helpful there as well.
And I guess disc brakes probably have a big development in the last few years.
Yeah,
probably coming at the same time with wide tyres.
Absolutely,
probably allowed wide tyres.
You couldn't make a bike like that without disc brakes.
Okay.
Traditional caliper rims, rim brakes. I think they max about 28 millimeters, I think, in terms of what, the tyre depends, obviously rim width and everything like that, but basically, getting a wide, big volume tyre and a rim brake is they don't go together. So in terms of doing a really big air volume tyre, disc brakes again, a really important development. So
you mentioned mountain bikes just now. We've seen a lot more influence from mountain bikes in terms of disc brakes and so on. Is that we've seen a lot more influence from mountain bike in terms of wide tyres?
Yeah, again, it's the physics, if you like, of the relationship of air pressure and the volume of the tyre and the sort of stiffness of the tyre itself. It's all it's all the same relationships that are going on, whether it's mountain bike or road bikes. So yeah, I think, but again, the pioneering of tubeless and the making tubeless as a system work well, obviously sort of happened first on mountain bikes. But if you want to make a big volume tyre, the bigger the volume of the tyre, the more inner tube there is. And so if you can get rid of the inner tube, the weight penalty suddenly disappears as well. So the two are, again, the sort of important relationship there.
And how important is tyre pressure to make the most of the wide tyre?
Well, this is really where it boils down to. again, and this is the same physics that's applied for the last sort of 150 years of the development of the pneumatic tyre, but there's a relationship essentially between the pressure, the air pressure inside, the cross-sectional volume of the tyre, and what's called the hoop stress, which is generated in the cross-section of the tyre belt. So it's a bit like a clamp, you've got that hoop stress which is going around the outside of the tyre, which keeps the tyre on the rim. So those three things interact with each other. So if you increase one, the other will decrease. But essentially, if you think of that hoop stress or the casing tension, as it's sometimes called. If you keep that sort of constant, you'll find that if you increase the volume of the tyre, the internal volume, you need to reduce the pressure to keep that casing tension constant. So that's the relationship. So bigger volume, lower pressure for the same sort of stiffness of the tyre. And that's really the basis of going bigger. So you fit bigger tyres, you then should be able to reduce the pressure for the same sort of rolling feel of the bike.
And how do you determine what pressure, if a viewer's watching and not sure what pressure for 28 or 32 or 40, how do you...
Well, most people will be familiar with what they've used up to now, and if you're thinking of going bigger on the tyre, you can get a bigger tyre in your frame or through your brakes, then you want to be thinking about reducing the pressure to keep this system in balance. There's some good blogs online actually about the relationship and the calculations, and you can go into a lot of depth with the physics of calculating the casing tension and then working out where your pressure needs to be when you alter the internal volume of the tyre. But essentially, it's really important to understand. It's actually counterintuitive. If you put your bigger tyres on and you just pump them up to the same pressure as you had with your smaller tyre, you're actually increasing the stiffness. You're actually making the ride more uncomfortable. So it's a really important relationship to understand. If I put bigger tyres on, I actually need to let the tyre pressure down in order to go faster. Now that is not something that's quite easy to understand until you've sort of done it and tested it. So, but it's important because you've spent the money, you've outlaid the cash to try and improve the comfort of your bike, but you potentially can make it actually worse. So, really important point to understand that.
That rained quite heavily.
Yes, it is, isn't it? It's like
the trouble with shooting outside is unpredictable UK weather. I was hoping it might just blow over, and there's some blue sky up there.
By tomorrow.
Should brave it?
Yeah,
brave it?
It's fine.
Okay, my notes are getting really wet. Okay, how wide can we go? Is there a limit to how wide a tyre we can go? Are we at the limits, or are there plenty of scope for going wider? Or is there a sweet spot in terms of width?
Well, I think what's the interesting development that's happened recently has been the Road Plus development. I think WTB have been really at the forefront of pushing the concept of running a 650B or 27.5 inch wheel, which was obviously smaller in diameter, but then running a 47mm tyre, which when you do the calculation actually gives you a rolling radius of about the same as a 700 by 25/28 tyre. So you're reducing the size of the rim, increasing the width and the volume and the rolling diameter of the tyre, and creating a bigger air volume. And that's really the key. But of course, that's not really retrofittable to probably a fairly conventional road bike, and hence the development of the gravel bike category as something which can be compatible with that single wing drivetrains as well, giving you that design envelope to work with around sort of areas like the chainstay. So in terms of going very big, you start to get into considerations of the frame needs to be designed a bit more specifically for that. So I think changing the diameter of the wheel is a fairly big step, and going down to 27.5 and really having a big volume tyre. But the proof of riding those bikes shows that the compliance and the comfort is phenomenal. The change you can get, rolling along on like a 45 psi pressure, but actually feeling like you're rolling along on a road bike in terms of its stiffness and the compliance is amazing. And because the condition of the roads, as we know, sadly, is what it is, it's actually probably the number one question as a manufacturer we get asked, across Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is what's the biggest tyre I can get in this bike I've just bought? What's the biggest tyre I can get in? And that's a consistent question, and it's fairly revealing, I think.
That's actually my next question. I stole my next question. Is 650B a natural evolution of where we've been going with 700C?
Well, I think...
And is it going to be widespread, or is it kind of a niche?
It's probably... I mean, you look at bicycle design and you think, well, how does it evolve and what drives the innovation? And often, certainly in mountain bike design over the last few years, it's been... I think the terrain has tended to dictate the design of the bikes. Something has to come first. So a chicken and egg situation, what comes first? So I think generally the terrain happens first, and then the bike design has to sort of keep up. The people design better, harder trails, steeper, so the bike has to sort of catch up with that. And so what we're seeing on the roads, certainly in the UK, the roads have become worse and worse and worse progressively.
Yeah.
And so actually, I need to design a bike with a better compliance system, whether that's some sort of suspension system or a more flexible seat post. But what actually happens when you do the numbers and you do the sort of proof of what on the bike has the biggest impact on compliance and comfort, it's the tyre system by a long way. A long way. And again, there's some really good blogs that have looked at what has the biggest effect. Is it the vertical stiffness of the frame? The old thing about vertical stiffness, lateral stiffness, vertical compliance, that whole sort of thing of marketing. Or is it the tyre? It's the tyre. By a huge way. The tyre is the most important thing in terms of developing compliance from the bike.
Yep.
And that's really what's driven the sort of new era, if you like, of Road Plus bikes.
Okay. Is tubeless an important part of the equation?
I think so, yeah. Mainly, we spoke about weight,
Yeah.
I think a 27.5 by 47mm inner tube weighs about 350 grams. So if you can get two of those out of the bike, that's that's just a big thing straight away.
They're not crucial to wide tyres in terms of getting the best benefits at wide tyres?
I don't think so. I think it's that sort of another incremental step, if you like, and the bike rides better for having tubeless, and we go out of our way to make the bike compatible with tubeless anyway for that reason. And there's a whole host of other benefits you get with tubeless anyway. But I think in terms of it really adding to the performance of the bike, it's definitely an advantage, particularly in compliance as well. You can just run that pressure a little bit lower without the risk of pinching. That's a big deal. And of course, pinch punctures off road are very common. Pinch punctures on the road are very common as well. So if you can get rid of the inner tube, it's a big advantage. Yeah.
So we talked about mostly pros of wide tyres. Are there any downsides to wide tyres? Extra weight must be one.
Yeah, there's potential for the weight. You do the comparison like for like. Obviously, the tyre's likely to be a little heavier. The rim's likely to be a bit wider as well to accommodate that. So there is, but then say if you can get rid of the inner tube, you're offsetting some of that potentially as well. I suppose you look at an aerodynamic analysis of it. Yeah, a 50mm tyre is going to be more to push through the air than a 25mm tyre. But it's not just, you don't just look at one thing in isolation. So if you're going to go for a ride, the condition of the roads just so important, isn't it? Whereas you ride an aero bike all the time on narrow tyres. So yeah, it's a consideration, but overall, I think it depends on where you are, where you're going to go for a ride, what sort of bike you're going to feel is the best for that. And Road Plus, in the current road climate, it's a very compelling bike.
So you urge everybody to get on wide tyres, as wide as a bike will take?
Yeah, or if you're going to go for the aero record, probably not. You might want to be on some 18mm silk tubs at 150 psi. But it's just how it is, isn't it? You just have to, and I think most people are finding that certainly from our feedback from customers and inquiries about what's the widest tyre I can get in the bike. It's a big topic.
I know it's something we talked about in the past, where you're a bike brand not restricted by designing pro bikes for the peloton. You design bikes for everyday riders here in the UK. Is that giving you a freedom that other brands might not enjoy because they are restricted by what Peter Sagan needs?
So yeah, there is a sort of a tradition, quite a big tradition, I suppose, in road bike design of what they look like and what that whole sort of historical racing pedigree of road bike brands. But it's such an interesting time in bike design. There's such a new whole host of new technical features coming in, tubeless and single ring drivetrains. And I think if you're really wedded to sort of a retrospective design philosophy, you could miss out on all these things. And they're so compelling. Disc brakes being a massive example of that. And one by drivetrain, as soon as you understand the benefits of one by drivetrains, you can see that the potential to push the bike and the development of the bike forward is really impressive. So, and some really interesting bikes being made at the moment.
Yeah, definitely an interesting time for bike
It is,
design, and
yeah.
I think the wide tyre trend is probably one of the most interesting kind of tech trends at the moment. But thanks for joining us, Ian.
That's okay.
That's very interesting. I hope you enjoyed our little chat about wide tyres. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe as well, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.